So I'm going to start off by saying that I absolutely hate micro SD cards sometimes. They're like 10mm sockets. They don't hit the ground, they just blink out of existence when you drop them. It's kind of annoying. Hey rail fans and model railroaders, James here with Boulder Creek Yard, and I'm coming at you with this week's edition of No Effort November. Turned out to be a whole heck of a lot more effort than I thought it was, but that's a good thing. It kind of forced me to go back and redo our entire image for the CabCam project. A lot of the recent updates with both Linux and Raspbian or Raspberry Pi OS have completely changed the way that all this stuff works, and the instructions that we had up on the Silicon Valley Lines website just did not work. So over the last week, I've spent time completely redoing the image and updating it and getting it to the point where you could basically download an image of our CabCam software that runs on the Raspberry Pi, install it on an SD card, and do a couple little quick things and go from there. All this information is linked in a new post on the Silicon Valley Lines website, and I will go ahead and leave that down in the description. So without further ado, I'm going to show you the OBS side of this piece of equipment right here that will allow you to actually stream this to Zoom, YouTube, etc., whatever you want, basically. Let's go for that right now. Alright, so here we are at the Silicon Valley Lines website, and where I have the most recent up-to-date instructions. So if this isn't the top post for our updated cam instructions, if you go to About Club SVL CabCam, we have a link to the etcher, and once you, or whatever your favorite SD card burning program is, if you have one. Personally, I like Belina because it's very easy. One thing to note, if you're using Google Drive in any way, shape, or form, you need to shut that down before you try to burn a copy of this SD card, otherwise it fails. Something about the way that it mounts it up just causes a lot of problems. Anyways, so once you have that burned to your SD card, you pop it out, pop it back in. You're going to put in the WPA supplicant. What this allows you to do is connect it to your Wi-Fi. And so once you already have that set up, pop it into your pop the SD card into your Raspberry Pi and then turn it on. It should automatically connect to your Wi-Fi. If not, you'll be able to Google a couple of quick solutions, and most of them are pretty easy to do. Once you get it on your Wi-Fi, you're going to log in. You want to download something called PuTTY, or you're going to use the SSH program or terminal on your laptop. But on Windows, you're going to use PuTTY, which is probably what a lot of people have. And if you want to know how that works, if you're using terminal, it's going to be named pi at cabcam.local. It's going to use the regular Raspberry Pi login credentials. I also have all the information on how to change that and how to set up MJPEG Streamer, because depending on how you built up your CabCam cart, it may end up looking completely different because you have it rotated on its side or something like that to fit inside of your You're going to go to whatever the IP address of your Raspberry Pi is. In my case, it's 1.207. I assigned that so I know what it is. Since we also use this camera at Silicon Valley Lines, it has a big number 7 on the side of it, so I know which camera it is, and I've just ended up assigning it basically the same IP address. Then you're going to have the port for the MJPEG streamer, and this part that says action equals stream. I believe that's just telling the browser to stream this video. So the cool thing about this is it's software agnostic, meaning that you can send this to anything that can accept an incoming IP address stream or an IP stream. So the way that I end up doing this for like home streaming and stuff like that is I have installed OBS, which stands for Open Broadcaster Software. This is an open source program that you can use that allows you to either stream to Google, Facebook, or YouTube, Facebook, Twitch. There's a whole list of things that you can stream to on this. The other cool thing is it's got this little bit that says Start Virtual Webcam. The cool thing about this is once you start streaming to the virtual webcam, you can redirect it to something like Google Meet or Zoom, Skype, basically anything that can take a webcam, a physical webcam on your computer, and you can turn this software into a virtual version of that. So it shows up and it says for your camera inputs, it says OBS Virtual Camera instead of Logitech C920 or whatever you have. And you can stream the video that way. So as you can see, this is a blank slate for you to do whatever you would like with this. You can set up all those really cool Twitch gamer type feeds with all the icons and graphics and whatnot if you'd like. Or you can have the video streamed to just this big old setup right here. So we're going to set up just one video here, one feed. It's basically going to kind of take up as much of the screen real estate as we can get it to take up. And then we'll go from there. So you're going to go down to the little plus icon, go to browser. There we go. Name this CabCam or whatever you want. It doesn't matter. You can see it pops up here and it says you just added a browser video source. So you're going to go down here, copy your IP stream link, paste it in, hit OK. And since I am streaming at, 640 by 480, it's not going to take up the whole screen. Anyways, if you just want to get this into a Zoom meeting or something, this is probably good enough for you. And if you're not interested in the really nice view of everything, you can stop here. Basically, all I got to do at this point is hit Start Virtual Camera, or if you're streaming to YouTube, Facebook, etc., you just hit Start Streaming. If you don't want any other graphics and you just want the stream itself. Alright, so to do a nicer stream or nicer Twitch, whatever, you want to look like one of the pro gamers, etc., you can go over and you can create your own frames and such, which I'm going to upload a couple of them, and they're going to be for you to modify yourself. So you're going to go import, you're going to click on the little 3 dots. In my case, I believe I have them downloads, OBS scenes, and then you're going to import the scene.json and then hit add. Oop. Hit import. There we go. And then you're going to go back to scene collection, SVL scene, or in your case, I'm going to name this template scenes or something like that. And you'll see that a couple of things are missing, which, not a big deal. Hit search directory. Realize they're not there. Wonder why they aren't there. and then have a little bit of panic. After you're done panicking, you can go back up to Scene Collection, and there's always this check for missing files. Say if you rename or you move your files, etc., and it's going to bring back up that screen. I don't know why this didn't work the first time, but then you just hit Search Directory, and it's not actually going to show anything here, but you could just hit Select Folder, and if all of your items are there with the proper name, you just hit Apply, and it's going to bring them in. So after you import, some things may be kind of out of place, and you may have to move things around. They tend to kind of snap into place. And then once you have everything where you want it, you can lock this preview, which I suggest doing because quite often I'm accidentally grabbing the wrong thing and moving it around. So I'm not really going to play with those too much right now. But you can see we have, this is exactly what I'm talking about. You may think you have the right thing selected, and you don't. Anyways, you can see that we have our logo on these, so that when we turn off one of the camera streams, it just shows our logo instead. So I'm not actually going to include... I did it again. I'm not actually going to include our logos in these, but what you can do is I'll show you how to bring your own in if you really care. See how much of a pain that is? Anyways, you just kind of move things around. I have this stream set up for 1920 by 1080p. If you're using 1280 by 720, you're going to have to resize a bunch of things, which isn't really that big of a deal. Anyways, you can see down here in the sources, I have stuff like text, upper camera left. If you click on that, I can change to train 98 with engine 4419, and it puts it up here, and you're just gonna have to play with sizing and whatnot. And we have the audio source right here. We don't actually really use this one too much anymore. We just have our audio brought in via Discord, and that's a completely separate topic. So you can see over here, you've got Cam 1. This is where you're actually going to input your camera information. So my address for the camera was 192.168.207. You hit OK. Hit the little eye icon to blank it out, and then you bring it back in. And I suggest that you play around with all of this stuff before you actually want to go live on anything, because as you can see, stuff gets out of order when you export these JSON files. So for that, we're going to go down here to the ops frame, and this is what I'm actually going to include is the ops frame and a couple of the other things that are set up in more of a generic view. So you're just going to bring this guy up until it is on top of everything but the text. Why it worked on one computer way down there but not another, I don't know. But anyways, if you need to move stuff around, you just use these buttons right here. You'll also see this little plus icon here. You can use this to add different sources, images, display capture, etc., etc. Another thing you can do is you can install the Droid Cam app and the Droid Cam plugin. And what this will allow you to do is actually take your cell phone and use it as a mobile webcam that will broadcast back to OBS here. The way that we end up usually using that at SVL is we have multiple sources that go in these two spots right here, and basically I can turn them off, change them, and do whatever I want with them, and they're separate from the actual cameras themselves. So basically another thing that we do with those is I set up look at our dispatching website right here, a little dispatching web page, so you can actually see different routes and what the dispatcher is doing with his trains. And then up here I'll sometimes have a static camera, or maybe I'll set it up so you're looking at a tail cam off the back of a caboose or something like that on a train, or what we call the SVL helicopter. So you can see I have all these different scenes right here, and as we go up to this one, you can see sometimes you run into this thing where your camera's upside down. Either the software on OBS is messed up, which in this case it is, or you've potentially got the video on your Droid or on your CabCam messed up and it's upside down. You need to go back in and use that rotate command in your startup for your camera. So in this case, since it's just in the OBS side, we're going to highlight that, right click, transform, rotate 180 degrees, and there you go. So as you flip through these different scenes, you'll see that they change pretty nicely. You can set up as many scenes or as few scenes as you want, and you can use them in any setup that you want. So with this one that says first person green, what that means is if you've got a webcam, you can set this as your webcam source right here, and you can do like a little blurb. If you're doing a stream, you can talk to people on your stream in first person view without showing anything else. And then you can easily roll into your camera views right here. Alright, so how does this help you run a remote operating session? So the way that we started out at Silicon Valley Lines was we started using this Start Virtual Webcam thing. And we were basically just forwarding it to Google Meet, and the engineers would look at the Google Meet and they'd see this view right here with all the cameras, and then they'd just look at their phone and they'd have a VPN through our router set up, and they just connect directly with Y-Throttle on iOS or Engine Driver on Android, or I think it's Train Control on the PC. And Mac users, well, you got to use your cell phone. Sorry. So that was all fine and dandy, and it works out pretty well. There's a little bit of lag introduced by Zoom or Google Meet, etc. And so another way that you could do this is instead of installing a VPN on your network with your router or through a laptop, etc., that allows people to get into your network, what you could do is you could just port forward the addresses for the camera, and then you could also port forward the addresses for your Y-Throttle server in JMRI. Using port forwarding does potentially have some security risks involved. However, for the time frame that you're using this, it's probably not going to be that bad, as long as you just remember to close down these ports at the end. So what you could do is you could port forward the port for your camera here and have somebody view that via your external IP address, let's say 1.1.1.1 port 933, and if they went to that with the action stream bit, they'd be able to see the camera, and then you just port forward your Y-Throttle and they'd be able to connect to that with Engine Driver, and just through that port forwarded address, whatever the port ends up being, and your external IP address. The other way to do this, and we have it set up a lot more complicated, and unfortunately we can't release this code out to everybody because it hasn't been cleared to be released yet, but we actually had our web throttle HTML file in JMRI modified a little bit so that it brings in this external camera, or this camera right here, into the actual throttle itself using JMRI's tokens. If you want to do something like that, I can tell you how to do the token stuff. I'm not going to get into it here because it's a little bit outside of the scope of this. But if you'd like to do that and you know how to modify CSS and JavaScript, go ahead and contact me and I'll tell you the JMRI token side of everything. So unfortunately, I'm going to kind of have to leave you to figure out how to actually use this for your streaming and your remote control operations stuff, just because there are so many different setups. However, if you have any questions, you can post them down below and we can either talk it over there or potentially via email, etc. There are also a couple of restrictions to this setup. Unfortunately, there's no audio as of yet. It can be a little bit choppy, as you can see here. But I think, if you have really good internet or really good Wi-Fi close to where your layout is, it's going to be robust enough. If you have an O or a G scale layout and you can use a Raspberry Pi 4 with this setup, you're going to be golden. Trust me on that one. Those are just so much more powerful, and for whatever reason, the Wi-Fi on them is significantly stronger, despite being an antenna of the same design. Right, so I'm going to leave you with this. This software can be as powerful as you want it to be if you know what you're doing. There are a lot of limitations to this project and this software and the CabCam image that I haven't really had time to sit down and resolve. Like, currently there's no audio that gets piped through from these cameras. That's not a huge deal. What you can do is you could set up a in-room microphone like the one that I'm talking on here, and you can just pipe in the audio to your stream from inside of the room. That way you can talk to people, and if you set it up in the right spot, you can get some of the engine noise. I'm sure that there's probably a way to combine a stream with an onboard microphone for the Raspberry Pi. I have my suspicions that a piece of software that can run on the Pi will work for this. I just haven't really had the time to sit down and actually try it. So that's on my list of future projects. The other thing is this software and the Raspberry Pi Zero needs pretty strong Wi-Fi, so if you have the ability to move your router or add an access point in your layout room, I do suggest that. If your router is on the other side of your house and your layout is in your basement, this may not work out very well for you, unfortunately, just because the Raspberry Pi Zero does not have very strong Wi-Fi. Now, if you're using a Raspberry Pi 4 and you are lucky enough to have a large G-scale or O-scale setup, you can use the Raspberry Pi 4. That gets around a lot of these problems with the Wi-Fi, and honestly, the processing power of the Raspberry Pi 4 is just drastically better than the Raspberry Pi 2 Zero even. So with that said, I'm hoping that there are people out there who are willing to take a look at this project and potentially come up with better ideas on how to make it run stronger and quicker. Maybe somebody knows of software that runs on Linux that I just completely overlooked because we're using MJPEG Streamer. That was easy. That got us working. But there may be something way better out there. The other thing that I'd like to keep this open to is I'd like to keep this open source any way possible. I'd even like to see like one of the big manufacturers out there build a dummy engine that you could slot a Raspberry Pi Zero into with a camera and have it look out the door, the front nose door of an engine, that little window that's there, and it would look a lot better than these little cars that we have with these setups on them. I'm not sure if we'll see that, because anytime that it seems that one of these big manufacturers wants to do that, they end up doing something like Rocco, where it's kind of has to stream to its own app, or you have to have some proprietary hardware as the receiver. We'll see what happens. I'm sure that the whole pandemic has got a lot of these companies thinking. At least I hope it has. Anyways, if you have any comments or suggestions, or you know of any software or hardware that runs better, go ahead and post it down in the comments and we'll chat about it and brainstorm some ideas. With that said, before I make this any longer and any more rant-like, I'll talk to you later. Boulder Creek Yard out.